The seeds of revenge. A vow at the graveside. The cold autumn wind swept through the cemetery, carrying with it the last golden leaves of the season. Alexander Knight stood alone before a simple granite headstone, his expensive black coat billowing around him. The name etched in the stone read, Richard Knight, beloved father, honest man. 10 years had passed since that terrible day. 10 years since his father had taken his last breath in a hospital bed, broken not by illness, but by betrayal. Alexander's jaw clenched as memories flooded back. He was only 22 then, fresh out of business school, when everything fell apart. I made it, Dad, Alexander whispered, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. I built everything back from nothing. And now, it's time they pay for what they did to you. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from his assistant, Morrison Charity Gala tonight. Your invitation is confirmed. A cold smile crossed Alexander's handsome face. The game was about to begin. The betrayal that changed everything. Alexander's mind drifted back to that devastating summer 10 years ago. His father, Richard Knight, had been a successful businessman with a mid-sized manufacturing company. He was honest, hardworking, and trusted his business partner completely. That partner was James Morrison. The Knights and Morrisons had been friends for 20 years. Alexander remembered playing in the Morrison mansion as a child, remembered James Morrison ruffling his hair and calling him son. He remembered thinking the Morrisons were family. But family doesn't destroy family. James Morrison had systematically stolen from the company for years. He falsified records, moved money into offshore accounts, and when the auditors finally caught wind of the discrepancies, he pinned everything on Richard Knight. Alexander could still see his father's face when the police arrived. The confusion, the horror, the betrayal cutting deeper than any knife could. James, tell them the truth, his father had begged. Tell them it wasn't me. But James Morrison had simply looked away, his face a mask of false sympathy. I'm sorry, Richard. I trusted you. I never thought you'd steal from your own company. The trial was swift and brutal. James had covered his tracks perfectly. Every piece of evidence pointed to Richard Knight. The media crucified him. Trusted businessman embezzles millions, the headlines screamed. Richard Knight was sentenced to 5 years in prison. But he never made it that long. The stress, the shame, the heartbreak, it destroyed him. He had a massive heart attack 6 months into his sentence. Alexander had been there, holding his father's hand in that sterile prison hospital. Son, his father had whispered, his voice weak. Don't let bitterness destroy you. Build something good. But as Alexander watched his father's eyes close for the last time, something dark had taken root in his heart. Not just grief, but cold, calculating rage. James Morrison had stolen everything. His father's business, his reputation, his life. And he'd walked away richer than ever. Until now. The rise of a phoenix. After his father's death, Alexander had nothing. The family home was seized. The bank accounts were frozen. He was 22 years old with a business degree and a burning desire for justice. He started from the bottom, working 3 jobs while studying the stock market every spare moment. He slept 4 hours a night, ate cheap noodles, and invested every penny he earned. His first big break came 2 years later when he predicted a market crash and shorted the right stocks. With his winnings, he bought a failing tech startup for pennies and turned it around. Then another company. Then another. Alexander Knight became a legend in the business world. At 32, he was worth $3 billion and controlled a diverse empire of technology, real estate, and manufacturing companies. But he never forgot why he was building this empire. Every success was another step toward his ultimate goal, destroying James Morrison. He'd watched the Morrison family from afar all these years. Watched them grow richer, watched them flaunt their wealth, watched them attend charity galas and pretend to be pillars of the community. Tonight, he would finally step out of the shadows. The Morrison Empire. The Morrison family lived like royalty. Their luxury brand empire, Morrison Luxury Group, controlled high-end hotels, fashion houses, and jewelry stores across the country. James Morrison had used the money he stole to expand aggressively, and it had paid off spectacularly. Now at 65, James Morrison was considered a self-made success story. Business magazines featured him. Universities invited him to speak. Charities courted his donations. It made Alexander sick. James had a wife, Margaret, who spent her days at country clubs and spa resorts. They had one child, a daughter named Isabella Morrison. Alexander had researched Isabella thoroughly. 26 years old, graduated from Princeton with a degree in art history. She worked at the Morrison Foundation, their family charity, organizing events and managing donations. From what he could gather, Isabella was different from her parents. She lived modestly despite her wealth, drove a simple car, and seemed genuinely committed to helping others. Social media showed her volunteering at soup kitchens and reading to children at hospitals. But that didn't matter to Alexander. Innocent or not, she was a Morrison. She had grown up in luxury built on stolen money, built on his father's grave. She would be the key to bringing down her father's empire. The charity gala. The Morrison Grand Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and elegance. Men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns mingled, champagne flutes in hand, discussing business deals and vacation homes. Alexander arrived fashionably late, knowing his entrance would cause a stir. He'd become famous in business circles, but he'd carefully avoided any events where he might encounter James Morrison. Until tonight. Mr. Knight, the event coordinator, rushed over, thrilled. "We're so honored you could attend. Your donation to tonight's cause is incredibly generous." Alexander had donated $500,000 to the Children's Hospital Fund, not out of charity, but to ensure his invitation was unquestionable. "My pleasure," Alexander said smoothly, his dark eyes scanning the room. And then he saw her. Isabella Morrison stood near the silent auction tables, explaining something to an elderly couple. She wore a simple emerald green gown that complemented her chestnut hair, which fell in soft waves past her shoulders. Unlike the other women dripping in diamonds, Isabella wore minimal jewelry, just small pearl earrings. She was beautiful, but it was more than that. There was a warmth to her, a genuine smile as she spoke with the couple, a light in her hazel eyes that seemed out of place in this world of superficial glamour. Alexander felt something unexpected twist in his chest. He pushed it aside. She was a target, nothing more. The first encounter. Alexander approached the auction tables, positioning himself near Isabella. He pretended to examine a donated painting while listening to her conversation. "The children's wing really needs this funding," Isabella was saying earnestly. "These kids are fighting so hard. The least we can do is make sure they have the best care and a comfortable place to recover." "Your passion is admirable, Miss Morrison," the elderly woman said kindly. Isabella's smile brightened. "I just remember being a kid and having to stay in the hospital for a week after a riding accident. I was terrified. If we can make it even a little less scary for these children, it's worth it." As the couple moved on, Alexander made his move. "That's a beautiful sentiment," he said, his voice smooth and deep. Isabella turned, and up close, Alexander could see flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. She studied him for a moment, a slight crease forming between her brows. "Thank you," she said politely. "Are you interested in the auction? This painting is from a local artist. All proceeds go to the hospital." "Actually, I'm more interested in the work you do," Alexander said, extending his hand. "Alexander Knight. I'm new to these events, and I'm looking to get more involved in charity work." Recognition flickered across Isabella's face. "Alexander Knight? The Alexander Knight? I've read about you. Your business success is legendary." "I've been fortunate," Alexander said modestly, though inside, his heart was racing with the thrill of the hunt. "But I've realized that success means nothing if you don't use it to help others." Isabella's face lit up. "That's exactly how I feel. So many people in wealthy circles, they give to charity for the tax breaks or the publicity. But real giving comes from the heart. Your father must be proud of your commitment," Alexander said, watching her reaction carefully. A shadow passed over Isabella's face, so quickly he almost missed it. "My father believes charity work is a good use of my time," she said carefully, "though he'd prefer I was more involved in the family business." Before Alexander could respond, a booming voice interrupted them. "Isabella, there you are." James Morrison approached, looking every bit the successful businessman in his custom tuxedo. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his smile practiced and political. Margaret Morrison glided beside him, dripping in diamonds. Alexander's blood turned to ice. Here was the man who destroyed his father, standing 3 feet away, smiling, pretending to be respectable. Father, Isabella said, her voice becoming more formal. Mother, I was just speaking with Alexander Knight, Alexander said, extending his hand before Isabella could introduce him. He forced himself to smile, to keep his voice steady. Mr. Morrison, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. James Morrison's handshake was firm, his eyes assessing. Knight, yes, I've heard of you. Impressive what you've built. You're quite the success story. I learned from the best, Alexander said, his double meaning clear only to himself. My father taught me everything about business. And about loyalty. Good values, James said, oblivious. Say, you should come by my office sometime. Always interested in meeting young entrepreneurs. Perhaps we could discuss some business opportunities. Alexander's smile didn't waver. I'd like that very much, Mr. Morrison. Margaret Morrison looked bored with the business talk. Isabella, darling, Senator Williams is here with his son Christopher. You remember Christopher, don't you? You two got along so well at the spring gala. Isabella's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, mother. I remember. Well, don't be rude. Go say hello. It wasn't a suggestion. Isabella glanced at Alexander apologetically. It was nice meeting you, Mr. Knight. The pleasure was mine, Miss Morrison, Alexander said. I hope we can continue our conversation about charity work. As Isabella walked away, James Morrison clapped Alexander on the shoulder. Beautiful girl, my Isabella. Smart, well-bred, perfect wife material. Christopher Williams is a good match. His father controls half the state's infrastructure contracts. Alexander felt disgust rise in his throat. Isabella wasn't a daughter to this man. She was a business asset. She seems to have her own ideas, Alexander observed carefully. James laughed. She's young, idealistic. She'll come around when she realizes how the world really works. And how does the world really work, Mr. Morrison? Alexander asked, his voice deceptively casual. The strong take what they can. The smart protect what they have. Everything else is just noise. James smiled, sipping his champagne. You seem like a smart man, Knight. You understand that, don't you? Oh, I understand perfectly, Alexander said softly. Perfectly. The seed is planted. Later that evening, Alexander stood on the hotel's balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below. The gala continued inside, but he needed air, needed to process. Meeting James Morrison face to face had been harder than expected. He'd wanted to grab the man by his expensive lapels and scream the truth, to make him confess what he'd done. But revenge required patience, precision. And then there was Isabella. She wasn't what he'd expected. He'd assumed she'd be like her parents, shallow, materialistic, cruel. But there was something genuine about her, something that made his plan feel complicated. Needed some air too? Alexander turned to find Isabella stepping onto the balcony. She'd wrapped a shawl around her shoulders against the evening chill. These events can be suffocating, Alexander admitted. Isabella laughed softly. Tell me about it. I've been attending them since I was 16. Sometimes I feel like I'm playing a part in someone else's life. Why do it then? Isabella was quiet for a moment, staring out at the city. Expectations. Family duty. The usual reasons people do things they don't want to do. And what do you want to do? Alexander asked, surprised to find he was genuinely curious. Travel, Isabella said immediately. See real places, not just luxury resorts. Help people in meaningful ways, not just write checks. Maybe open a gallery for struggling artists. Give them a platform. She laughed self-consciously. That sounds naive, doesn't it? It sounds honest, Alexander said. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Isabella turned to him. Can I ask you something, Mr. Knight? Alexander, please. Alexander. She smiled. Why did you really come tonight? I saw your name on the donor list. $500,000. You could have just sent a check. Someone like you doesn't need to attend charity galas for networking. Alexander was impressed. She was more perceptive than he'd given her credit for. You're right, he said carefully. I came because I'm looking for something. A purpose beyond just making money. And have you found it? Alexander looked at her, at this beautiful, genuine woman who had no idea she was standing with her family's destroyer. I think I'm beginning to. The business proposition. Over the next 2 weeks, Alexander made his move. He contacted James Morrison's office and arranged a lunch meeting. The bait, a potential partnership on a luxury resort project in Colorado. James took the meeting eagerly. Alexander Knight was worth billions and had a golden touch in business. An alliance with him could open doors. They met at an exclusive restaurant, all leather booths and quiet conversations. "I've done my research on Morrison Luxury Group," Alexander said, spreading documents across the table. "Your brand recognition is excellent, but you're not maximizing your digital presence. The luxury market is shifting online, and you're behind the curve." James frowned, his pride stung. "We've been very successful with our traditional model. Past success doesn't guarantee future returns," Alexander said smoothly. "But I'm not here to criticize. I'm here to offer a solution." He pulled out a proposal. "I want to help Morrison Luxury Group modernize. We'd create a partnership, my technology and digital expertise combined with your brand legacy. We'd launch a new line of luxury experiences, exclusive travel packages, personalized concierge services, all bookable through a revolutionary app." James's eyes lit up. This was exactly the kind of forward-thinking expansion he'd been considering. "What's your angle, Knight? What do you get out of this?" 20% equity in the partnership division," Alexander said. "And I want someone from your organization working closely with my team. Someone who understands the Morrison brand values and can ensure quality. I can assign one of my vice presidents." "I want Isabella," Alexander interrupted. James blinked. "My daughter? She doesn't work in the business operations. She runs the charity foundation." "Exactly," Alexander said. "Your company is seen as corporate, distant. Isabella is seen as genuine, caring. Her involvement would humanize the brand. Plus, from what I understand, she has excellent organizational skills and an eye for quality. That's what this project needs." It was a brilliant move, and Alexander knew it. James would see the value in having Isabella's public image attached to the project, and it would give Alexander unlimited access to the Morrison family. James considered, then smiled. "You're a clever one, Knight. All right, Isabella will be your liaison, but she's inexperienced in business operations. You'll need to be patient with her. I'm sure she'll exceed all expectations," Alexander said. That evening, Alexander received a text from an unknown number. "This is Isabella Morrison. My father said you requested me for your project. I'm not sure why, but I'm looking forward to working with you." "I am." Alexander stared at the message for a long moment. Phase 1 was complete. Isabella was now within his reach. He typed back, "The pleasure will be mine, Miss Morrison. I have a feeling this partnership will change everything." He hit send, then added one more message. "Call me Alexander. We're going to be working closely together." Her response came quickly. "Only if you call me Isabella." Smiling face with smiling eyes. Alexander stared at that simple smiley emoji, and for the first time since beginning his plan, he felt a flicker of doubt. She seemed so genuine, so kind, but he'd come too far to turn back now. Justice for his father demanded it. He put his phone down and walked to his study, where a single photograph hung on the wall, his father, smiling, taken before everything fell apart. "It's beginning, Dad," Alexander whispered. "They'll pay for what they did. I promise." Outside his window, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, as if nature itself knew that what was coming would change everything for everyone involved. The seeds of revenge had been planted. Now it was time to watch them grow, tangled in deception, working together. 3 weeks into their partnership, Alexander found himself looking forward to his meetings with Isabella more than he wanted to admit. They met every morning at his downtown office, a sleek glass tower that overlooked the city. Isabella arrived exactly on time each day, always carrying a leather notebook and 2 cups of coffee, one for her, one for him. She'd somehow learned he took his black with 1 sugar. "Good morning," she said brightly, placing his cup on his desk. "I finished reviewing the market analysis you sent. I have some thoughts." Alexander leaned back in his chair, studying her. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back in a professional ponytail. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry. So different from her mother. "I'm listening," he said. Isabella pulled up a presentation on her tablet. "Your digital strategy is perfect for younger luxury consumers. But you're missing a huge market, legacy clients. People like my parents' generation who have money but are intimidated by technology." She showed him her proposal, a concierge service that would help older clients transition to the digital platform, with human assistance available 24/7. "It's not just about the app," Isabella explained passionately. It's about making people feel valued, regardless of their tech skills. Luxury is personal. It should never feel cold or automated. Alexander was impressed. More than impressed. She'd identified a gap he'd missed. "This is excellent work, Isabella," he said genuinely. "You have good instincts." She beamed at the praise, and Alexander felt something warm spread through his chest. He pushed it away firmly. She was still a Morrison, still part of the family he was meant to destroy. But day by day, that became harder to remember. Late nights and shared secrets. As the project progressed, their work hours stretched longer. One evening, they were alone in Alexander's office, the city lights twinkling below them. It was past 9, and they'd been working for 12 hours straight. "I'm starving," Isabella admitted, rubbing her eyes. "I forgot to eat lunch again." "Again?" Alexander frowned. "That's the third time this week. You need to take better care of yourself," says the man who survives on black coffee and determination, Isabella teased. Alexander smiled despite himself. "Fair point. Let me order something." "What do you like?" "Anything except sushi. I'm allergic to shellfish." Alexander called his favorite Italian restaurant and ordered their best dishes. While they waited, Isabella wandered to his office window, gazing out at the city. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said quietly. "You can ask. I may not answer. Why did you really start this company? I mean, I've read the articles about you being self-made, but there's more to it, isn't there? There's something driving you beyond just success." Alexander's jaw tightened. She was too perceptive. "What makes you think that?" "Because I recognize it," Isabella said, turning to face him. "That look in your eyes sometimes. Like you're fighting a battle no one else can see." For a moment, Alexander considered telling her everything. The truth about her father, about his own father, about the real reason he'd orchestrated their partnership. But he couldn't. "Not yet. I lost someone," he said carefully. "Someone who believed in me. I built this empire to honor his memory." "Your father?" Isabella guessed softly. Alexander nodded, not trusting his voice. Isabella walked over and, without warning, placed her hand on his arm. The touch was gentle, comforting. "I'm sorry. I know what it's like to feel like you're living for someone else's dreams." "What do you mean?" Isabella sighed, withdrawing her hand. "My father has my entire life planned out. Marry the right man, have the right children, attend the right events. It doesn't matter what I want. I'm just another asset in the Morrison portfolio. Why not leave? You're 26. You could build your own life." "And do what?" "I've been groomed to be a Morrison my entire life. I don't know how to be anything else." She laughed bitterly. "Besides, my father controls my trust fund until I'm 30 or until I marry someone he approves of. Whichever comes first." Alexander felt anger rise in his throat. James Morrison controlled every aspect of his daughter's life, just like he'd tried to control everything else. "That's not right," Alexander said. "You're not property." "Try telling him that," Isabella said. Then she brightened, clearly wanting to change the subject. "But enough about my problems. Tell me something about you. Something real. Something not in the business magazines." Alexander thought for a moment. "I'm terrified of deep water. I nearly drowned when I was 8. Isabella's eyes widened. "Really? But you own that yacht. I saw pictures in Forbes." "I own it. I never actually go on it." Alexander smiled ruefully. "Stupid, isn't it? A billionaire with a yacht he's afraid to use." "It's not stupid," Isabella said gently. "It's human. It's the most real thing you've told me about yourself." The food arrived, and they ate together in comfortable silence. As Isabella laughed at something on her phone, Alexander realized with growing dread that he was starting to care about her. Not as a tool for revenge, but as a person. This was dangerous. This was not part of the plan. The unwanted suitor. 2 days later, Alexander arrived at the office to find Isabella visibly upset. Her eyes were red, and she clutched her coffee cup like a lifeline. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. Isabella tried to smile. "Nothing. Family stuff. Let's just work." "Isabella." Alexander's voice was firm but gentle. "Tell me what happened." She broke down then, tears streaming down her face. "My father invited Christopher Williams to dinner last night. Christopher proposed. In front of everyone." Alexander's blood ran cold. "What did you say?" "I said I needed time to think. But my father," he pulled me aside after. "He said this marriage is important for the family business. That Senator Williams can open doors we need." that I'm being selfish and ungrateful if I refuse. You don't love Christopher, Alexander stated. I barely know him. We've been on maybe 5 dates, all arranged by our parents. He's not a bad person, but Isabella struggled for words. He sees me the same way my father does, as a beautiful object to display. He's never once asked me about my dreams or my opinions or what I want from life. Then tell him no, Alexander said firmly. You don't understand. My father will cut me off completely. I'll lose access to my trust fund, to the foundation work I love. He'll make sure I can't get a job anywhere in our social circle. Isabella wiped her tears angrily. I'm trapped. Alexander's mind raced. This wasn't part of his plan, but he couldn't stand by and watch Isabella be forced into a loveless marriage. What if there was another option? He said slowly. What do you mean? Your father said you could access your trust fund if you marry someone he approves of, correct? Yes, but what if you were engaged to someone else? Someone he couldn't refuse because it would benefit his business interests? Isabella stared at him. Alexander, what are you saying? Marry me, Alexander said. A business arrangement. We announce our engagement. Your father can't object because a partnership with me would be incredibly valuable to Morrison Luxury Group. You get access to your trust fund and freedom from Christopher. I get. He paused, his original revenge plan flickering in his mind. I get a brilliant business partner and a buffer against the society women constantly being thrown at me. That's crazy, Isabella whispered. Is it? Think about it, Isabella. It solves both our problems. We'd set a long engagement, give ourselves time. If it doesn't work, we can break it off later. But at least it would give you breathing room. Isabella searched his face. Why would you do this for me? Because I'm falling for you, Alexander thought. Because the idea of you marrying someone else makes me want to burn the world down. But he couldn't say that. Instead, he said, because you deserve a choice. And because I think we make a good team. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay, let's do it. The announcement. James Morrison was suspicious when Alexander requested an urgent dinner meeting at the family mansion. He became even more suspicious when Alexander asked that Isabella be present. They gathered in the Morrisons' formal dining room, all crystal and silver and old money elegance. Margaret Morrison looked curious. James looked calculating. Mr. Morrison, Mrs. Morrison, Alexander began formally. I asked to meet with you tonight because I have something important to discuss. Something concerning Isabella and myself. James's eyes narrowed. Go on. Alexander took Isabella's hand. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple in love. Over the past month, Isabella and I have been working closely together. In that time, I've come to admire her intelligence, her compassion, and her vision. She's unlike anyone I've ever met. What are you saying, Mr. Knight? Margaret asked, leaning forward with interest. I'm saying I've fallen in love with your daughter, and I'd like your blessing to marry her. The silence was deafening. James's face went through several emotions: surprise, calculation, and finally, satisfaction. This is quite sudden. I know it seems fast, Isabella said, her voice steady though Alexander could feel her hand trembling in his. But when you know, you know. Alexander makes me happy. He sees me, really sees me, not just the Morrison name. Margaret was practically glowing. Oh, Isabella, this is wonderful. Alexander Knight, our daughter marrying one of the most successful businessmen in the country. But James was still watching them carefully. And what about Christopher Williams? I thought we had an understanding there. Father, I don't love Christopher, Isabella said firmly. I love Alexander. The words sent a jolt through Alexander's system. She was acting, he reminded himself. This was all part of the plan. But the way she looked at him didn't feel like acting. James stood, walking around the table to stand before them. Marriage is about more than love, Isabella. It's about partnership, about building empires, about legacy. I agree completely, Alexander said smoothly. Which is why I think Isabella and I are perfect for each other. Our partnership has already proven successful in business. Imagine what we could build together as a married couple. Morrison Luxury Group and Knight Enterprises united. We dominate the luxury market. Alexander could see the wheels turning in James's head. Christopher Williams brought political connections, but Alexander Knight brought billions of dollars and business genius. Finally, James smiled. Welcome to the family, Alexander. As Margaret fussed over wedding plans and Isabella played the role of blushing bride-to-be, Alexander felt the walls of his revenge plan closing in. He'd gotten what he wanted: unlimited access to the Morrison family, the perfect position to destroy them from within. So why did it feel like he was the one being trapped? Cracks in the foundation. The engagement announcement made headlines. Billionaire bachelor Alexander Knight to marry Morrison heiress, the business section proclaimed. Society pages gushed about the perfect power couple. Alexander's assistant, Marcus, had been with him for 5 years. He knew about Alexander's past, about his father, about the years of careful planning for revenge. "Boss, we need to talk," Marcus said, closing the office door firmly behind him. "Not now, Marcus." "Yes, now. What are you doing?" "The engagement to Isabella Morrison. This wasn't the plan." "It's an evolution of the plan," Alexander said coldly. "Now I'm inside the family. I can do more damage." "You're lying to yourself," Marcus said bluntly. "I've seen how you look at her. This stopped being about revenge the moment you actually got to know her." "You're wrong." "Am I?" "Because from where I'm standing, you're about to hurt an innocent woman who trusts you, believes you love her. How is that different from what James Morrison did to your father?" Alexander slammed his hand on the desk. "Don't you dare compare me to him. Then prove me wrong. Follow through with the original plan. Expose James Morrison's crimes, bring down his empire, and walk away from Isabella without a second thought." Marcus's voice softened. "But we both know you can't do that. Not anymore." After Marcus left, Alexander sat alone in his office as the sun set over the city. He pulled up a file on his computer: 10 years of research, evidence gathering, careful documentation of James Morrison's crimes. He had everything he needed: bank records showing the money trail, testimony from a former Morrison accountant willing to talk, documents proving James had falsified evidence against Richard Knight. One phone call to the right prosecutor, and James Morrison would be finished. His empire would crumble. He'd face criminal charges, possibly prison time. It was everything Alexander had worked toward for a decade. But it would also destroy Isabella. Her father would go to prison. The family name would be ruined. The foundation she loved would collapse. And she'd discover that the man she'd agreed to marry had been using her all along. Alexander closed the file. What was he becoming? The business war begins. Despite his doubts, Alexander couldn't stop the momentum he'd set in motion. 3 weeks after the engagement, he launched the first phase of his attack on Morrison Luxury Group. It started subtly. A few negative articles in trade publications about Morrison's outdated business practices. Rumors that their flagship hotels were losing market share. Whispers that their fashion line was no longer trendy. Then Alexander made his move. He bought controlling interest in Morrison's largest supplier, immediately raising their costs by 30%. He poached their best designers and executives with massive salary offers. He opened competing luxury hotels in 3 cities where Morrison had dominance. James Morrison fought back, but Alexander was younger, faster, and had deeper pockets. Within a month, Morrison Luxury Group's stock price had dropped 15%. Isabella noticed the tension at family dinners. Her father's face was drawn, worried. Business calls interrupted meals. Her mother complained about postponing renovations to their summer house. "Father, what's happening with the company?" Isabella asked one evening. "Nothing for you to worry about, darling," James said tersely. "Just normal market fluctuations." But Isabella wasn't stupid. She'd been running the foundation long enough to understand financial reports. Morrison Luxury Group was bleeding money, and it was happening fast. She confronted Alexander at his office. "Are you attacking my father's company?" Alexander looked up from his laptop, his face carefully neutral. "It's business, Isabella. Knight Enterprises is expanding into the luxury market. Sometimes that means competing with established players." "Competing?" Isabella's voice rose. "You're systematically dismantling everything he's built. The supplier contracts, the poaching, the negative press. This isn't competition, Alexander. This is warfare. Your father understands how business works. If he can't compete, that's on him." Isabella stared at him, seeing something cold in his eyes she'd never noticed before. "This isn't just business to you. What's really going on?" "Nothing. I'm building my empire, same as your father built his." But Isabella left his office with a growing sense of dread. Something was wrong. Something beneath the surface that she couldn't quite see. That night, Unable to sleep, she went to her father's study. She'd been there 100 times, but tonight she looked with new eyes. Old filing cabinets lined one wall. Her father's desk held family photos and business awards. And in the back corner, a locked cabinet she'd never paid attention to before. Isabella found the key in her father's desk drawer. He'd never been good at hiding things. Inside the cabinet were boxes of old files, some dating back 20 years. She pulled out a box labeled Knight Partnership 2005 to 2014. Knight, Alexander's last name. With shaking hands, Isabella opened the box. Inside were contracts, financial statements, letters, and newspaper clippings about a man named Richard Knight, arrested for embezzlement, dying in prison. The photo accompanying one article showed a man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. And standing beside him in an older photo was a young man, barely 20, but unmistakably Alexander. Isabella's world tilted. The truth revealed. Isabella spent the entire night reading through the files. By dawn, she understood everything. Richard Knight and James Morrison had been business partners. Richard Knight had been framed for embezzlement. He died in prison while his partner, her father, took control of the company and built an empire with the stolen money. And Alexander Knight, Richard's son, was the man she'd agreed to marry. The engagement wasn't real. The partnership wasn't real. Everything had been a lie, carefully constructed to get close to her family, to destroy them. Isabella felt sick. She'd fallen in love with Alexander. Real, deep, consuming love. She'd started to believe in a future together, started to imagine children and growing old and building something beautiful.